Please listen to the story, The Man in the Green Hat, a lifetime of haunting. Some people live in haunted houses. But what if the hauntings follow you everywhere? From sleep paralysis to ghostly whispers. Something has always been watching him. My name is Edwin, and here is Ted's true scary story. My name is Ted. I'm from Vietnam, and I came here when I was a teenager. I was 13. I'm from Orange County, California. It already started when I was in high school, in the early to mid-2000s. We lived in an apartment for low-income folks. And really the first time editing the I've experienced was one afternoon when, after I got home from school, usually my parents will be at work. My siblings, they will be at school. So I will be home by myself for a couple of hours. In this apartment, once you walk in, you hit the living room first. And then on your left side, you see the kitchen window. And on the right side is a hallway to the bedroom. I came home and I heard water running in the kitchen. And I heard the opening and closing of the kitchen cupboard. Thinking, maybe it's my mom. Sometimes she would come home early. I turned right into the hallway to go to the bedroom, just to take a nap after school. And I yelled out to my mom, who say, "Hey, can you wake me up in a couple hours?" And I heard her reply. It was a raspy female voice. "Okay, Con. Okay, my son in Vietnamese." Voice was raspy, so I thought, maybe she's sick and she must have a cough. And that's why she was raspy. And that's why she don't come home early from work. So I went to took a nap, and then about an hour later, I got a phone call, and it was my mom. So I answered it, and she said, "Hey, what did you want to eat?" Because she had to stay late at work, and she was not going to go to cook dinner. And I realized that whoever it was in the kitchen early was not my mom. That time right before sunset, when it's still light outside, but then inside your house is still dark. It was pitch black, and inside was an eerie silence. And I told my mom, "Please come home early," and I was like a teenager. But I was still a kid. I sat up in bed, and I was so afraid. I didn't want to move, because I didn't close the bedroom door. And now, I'm staring into the dark hallway, and the whole time thinking, who was that? Thankfully, my dad came home only 20 minutes later, and I asked everyone in the house, did anyone come home earlier? And no one said that they did. Just chalked it up to my imagination. But it left a nagging feeling that it was something more than that. About 6 months later, I just gotten back from a wrestling practice, and I was exhausted, so I dozed off to sleep, and usually I had a radio alarm clock next to me, and I was fall asleep listening to the radio. This time, I woke up suddenly and not knowing where I was. I woke up, but my eyes were still closed. I heard there's music playing from the radio, and I remember I left the radio on when I went to sleep. I realized I must be in bed, so I opened my eyes, and I could no longer hear the song, and I was staring at the ceiling, unable to move. So I yelled out, "Mama." I could only hear the sound in my head because my mouth wouldn't open. So I closed my eyes for a moment, and I heard the song. Song was on radio, so I knew that I was in bed. And also I know I was awake, but I could not move, so I opened my eyes, looked at the ceiling, and I could not move, and I couldn't hear the song anymore. So I kept doing that. I don't know how long. It felt very long. I felt my arms and my legs moving finally. So I was like, yes, I'm finally awake, and I was sleeping on the edge of the bed. So I thought, If I turn over and I fell down, it hurts, but then I would wake up. So I try moving my arms and my legs over, and I turn over, and I felt my body falling, and I felt the thud as it hit the floor, and I felt the shock and the pain of it. I must be awake by now, so I opened my eyes, and I'm still back in bed looking at the ceiling. I tried again. I tried falling off the bed again, and it kept doing it, and I was stuck in a nightmare. But a few times, I finally woke up. When I woke up, I couldn't trust that I was really awake. I was sweating so much, and it was that cold sweat, and my shirt was damp with sweat, and my heart was racing. That was the first time that I truly felt afraid. Is fear being locked inside your own body? Shortly after that, I had my first vivid or lucid dream. In my dream, I was at home, but nobody else was there, and the layout of the apartment I was in the dream, it was the same layout, but the furniture was different. It was older, it was dustier. I walked out from my bedroom to the hallway, and there was a fallen mirror there, with a diagonal crack on it. I walked in front of it, and I saw the reflection of a little Caucasian boy with a bowl-cut blonde hair and blue eyes. I said to myself, "This isn't real. I must be dreaming." I woke up, and it was the first time that I realized. I could tell that when I'm in a dream or not. And it was one of those weird dreams. The next time I had another weird dream. I was floating around the apartment. This time the furniture in the room was in. In it, the house was also different than the previous dream. I was floating around. I wasn't walking. You know. I went through the kitchen. I went through the sliding door in the kitchen to the backyard, and immediately I came face to face with a darker-skinned Hispanic and Native American man. No, he didn't look scary or anything, but he said, "What are you doing in my house?" And they're very confused with a very loud voice, like I could hear in my head. I was shocked, you know. I could hear him, and I could see his face. And I woke up sweating again, and I was like, okay, maybe I was a spirit back in the day or something. It felt like that. Everything that has happened so far. It was all in my dreams. So I just thought again, and I wanted to have a very active imagination. It's just, silly dreams. And then a few months later, one night I was taking a shower, and then I felt someone watching me. So I cleaned the shambles from a face, and I looked out through the frosted bathroom. Sliding door. It was a male figure. He was in a light blue buttoned shirt and tan slacks, pulled up way past his belly, and a green hard hat. Very official looking. So I was like, oh, my God, someone is in the bathroom with me. So I slid open the frosted door. No one was there. I stood there for a moment. I'm saying I must have imagined the whole thing. I was so scared I didn't even finish showering. I just rinsed off and dried up. And I ran out into my room that night. My dad told me that my paternal grandfather is dead. He passed away in Vietnam. At that time, I turned on Yahoo Messenger to communicate with the family in Vietnam, find out what happened, and then, a few days later, we watched the funeral procession on the internet. A few weeks later, we got a DVD from Vietnam, from the funeral, and we all watched it. And at the end of the video, there was a slideshow showing all the photos of my grandfather. During the slideshow, a picture popped up, and I had to pause the DVD because it was a picture of him in his youth. volunteer uniform, light blue button shirt, tan slacks, and a green wide jungle hat. I couldn't believe it. My whole family is Catholic, but they do not believe in ghosts or demons or anything, because it's the house of God, and God wouldn't let any supernatural things happening. Just talking about it was not looked favorably upon. So I calculated what time that I saw that figure, and it was a few minutes after he passed in Vietnam. The following year, we moved to a different apartment. And the thing about Orange County, California is, it's home to the largest concentration of Vietnamese immigrants, and there have been a few generations that have been here before the 70s, before the end of the war. So we were excited to move to a new, more spacious 2-story apartment. At that time, I was going off to college, but I stayed home to save money. That's when the sleep paralysis escalated. I started seeing figures. I felt the bed move during the sleep paralysis episode. The stereotypical packmen staring at me. They had women straddling me while I'm in the sleep paralysis and looking at me. One time, I was sleeping in the living room on the couch, and I had sleep paralysis, and I heard someone walking up the stairs. So it was a 2-story apartment. So it's a 2nd story who had stairs going up. So I was, in the living room. I had sleep paralysis, and I heard someone moving up the stairs, slowly but intentionally walking, so you can hear them. The first step, dude, dude, dude. And a deep voicemail said, I'm coming to get you. And by this time, I'm used to it. So I knew how to wake myself out of sleep paralysis. I just used to shake my head really hard. And if I shake it really hard, I would wake up. I'm a very skeptical person. I like to think I'm rational. So I looked into it, and there was proposed theories on how or why sleep paralysis happens. It's the theta brainwaves, invading other type of brainwaves during sleep. And normally your body is paralyzed, so you don't act out your dreams. So sometimes you wake up and your mind is woken up, but your body hasn't woken up with it. So you're still paralyzed. And I rationalized it as it's just something that happened. It's a physiological phenomenon. It's not real. So I just kept on living my life. And with sleep paralysis, as you know, that is something common. And then one night, I was studying in the living room again. Well, early into the morning, around 3 a.m., I heard footsteps coming from the bedroom upstairs. Let's not tune abnormal. People in my family, they would come down for a glass of water. But this time, it was my teenage sister. She had a dazed look on her face. She was staring in a distance as she was walking through the living room, as she walked into the kitchen. So I thought maybe she's sleepwalking. And it's the first time I've seen someone sleepwalking. So I pay attention. I didn't want to wake her, because I read all the lore that you're not supposed to wake a person that's sleepwalking. You just guide them back to bed. So she walked to the kitchen, and she walked to the kitchen window. She opened imaginary door. She looked up and down, and then she closed the door. And she turned around and went back to bed. So a few weeks later, I found out, incidentally, from the landlord that the tenant before last, they had a brown fridge next to the kitchen window. The pictures he took before they moved out. Because before people move out back then, they just came in and took pictures to see if there's any damage. He dug it up, he showed me. And there was a fridge, exactly where my sister was, pretending to open the door. And I couldn't believe it. because it was exactly where she was at, in front of the kitchen window. But again, I wasn't allowed to talk about any of this in my house, so I explained it away as a coincidence. I just brushed it off. It's early morning. I went down to the kitchen again to get water. As I turned a corner into the kitchen, I saw someone sitting there in the dark, at the kitchen table, and the figure looked like my dad. I was like, "Hey, Dad, what are you doing awake?" He didn't answer me. "Oh yeah, I got some water," went back up, and the door to my parents' bedroom was open. I was drinking water, and I looked in, and I saw my parents sleeping in there, so I stopped. I turned on the light, and I ran downstairs. Of course, there was nobody there. Another late-night study, and I was laying on the sofa with a laptop on my chest, after an hour in that position. And my back was hurting a little bit, so I set up to put my laptop on the coffee table, and just before I put it down, the table slipped like a good foot away from me. And the coffee table it was not too heavy, but it was heavy. I just held a laptop in my hands, and I was like, I froze. I'm trying to process what happened. In California, earthquakes aren't that uncommon. So I explained it away as an earthquake, But I knew that it was an earthquake. The whole apartment, everything would be shaken and moved. And not just one coffee table. So now, I'm 2 years into college. We welcome into addition to our house. My baby sister was born. She was the joy of our lives. And I love taking care of her and spending time with her. When she was 2, I was taking care of her one morning, and we were alone in the 2-story apartment. And after giving her a bath and I put clothes on her, I was going to take her downstairs to get something to eat. And I had turned a corner, and I was a couple of steps down the stairs, and she was about to go with me, when she's turned back to look at the bedroom hallway, and she said, "Hey, look, there's a lady there." So I just grabbed her and I just booked it downstairs. Again, I played it out as her imagination, and I didn't want to acknowledge it. Shortly thereafter, we had a roommate. He was a son of a family friend, so he came in to study, so we gave him a place to stay. He shared a bedroom with me. Now, the whole time, there was always something going on in the room that I slept in. Things like feeling being watched, waking up feeling someone sitting in the bed, with a depression in the mattress, and especially the door opening on its own. So outside of this bedroom is a bedroom hallway, and there was a loose piece of floorboard right outside of it. So if you walk slowly, you would hear the creak of the floorboard. At around 3 or 4 a.m., almost every single night, I would hear the floorboard creaking. And again, I just explained this as someone in my family, just probably waking up to get some water. But the door kept opening by itself, around 3 or 4 a.m. every night. Because I would just wake up with the door open, even though I remember closing the door before I go to sleep. I asked everyone if they opened the door to check on us during the night, and nobody said they did. I tried to rule out any physical explanation. We closed the window, so there's no draft that was pulling the door open from outside. We changed the locks, we changed the door. Then we changed the hole in the door frame, where the locking mechanism goes in. So basically, we changed the whole thing. Sort of changing the frame cause. It was a rented apartment, but the door kept opening. And so one night, we were up in bed. He was in his bed, I was in my bed. We were each on our laptop. and then we heard the door handle turning. We looked to see who's checking on us, but the door creaked open, and the door had no turnback. There was nobody there. The door was in this place, and you had to turn the handle and push to open it. Finally, I got up and I closed the door and I locked it. Then I was convinced that there was no explanation for a lot of stuff. That was happening. The first EVP that we captured, my roommate was an amateur rapper. He would write and record a song. It was like a whole thing in the late 2000s. One afternoon I came back from class, and I saw him laying in his bed with his headphones on, editing his songs. This time he was staring at his laptop, and his face was like flushed, like he was like red, and he looked shocked. So he told me to come here, put your headphone on, and listen to this. So he had his audio playback open, and I saw the different spikes of his voice. On the audiogram, before those specks of his voice, there was one single spike. So he played it. The voice of an older man in Vietnamese rang land, which is keep going. And he was visibly scared. And I didn't know what EVP was so surreal at that time. So I put a recorder in my room later and went to school. I made sure that all the doors were closed. All the window was closed. There was no one at home during the day. That people either went to work, or went to school. So I got home that day and I listened to the playback. 4 hours of static nothing. I'm in the middle of doing math. I heard an older lady laughing. I guess from her age, she was a middle-aged lady. Again, I tried to rationalize it right. Maybe it was the sound from outside. But I checked with the neighbors. At that time, there was nobody around anyway. Went to school and went to work. It was weird, so I didn't try to record anything else. One night, I woke up in the middle of sleep, and I knew I was having sleep paralysis. I was laying on my side and was looking at my roommate. I said I couldn't see his face, because there was a pale white legs in front of it, belonging to a girl, and she wasn't my sister, because her legs and thighs were not as thin as my sister's. I put white legs and it turned around. It started to bend down. I closed my eyes, because I knew whoever it was bent down to look at me. I pretended to be asleep, but I could feel the eyes looking at me. And I woke up, and I saw my roommate laying on his side, looking at me, and I could tell that he saw her too, because he was scared. But he just turned away towards his wall and went back to sleep. Eventually, he found a place on his own and he moved out. I moved to the other bedroom with my little brother. On the wall, there was a heavy wooden cross, a good 10 pounds, and it was right where I slept. So it was right on top of my head. One night I was sleeping, and suddenly I heard someone yell in my left ear, "Tan." That's my Vietnamese name. I just jolted awake just as a reaction. I put my hands up. As I put my hands up, the cross fell into my hand. They pushed into my head. It hurt. I looked at my little brother, and he was sleeping. So if someone was really there, it would have hurt him. It was really loud, either in my ears or in my head. I was confused. There was a little bit of adrenaline too, because I woke up and something fell in my head. I put a cross on the table and put a pillow over my head and went back to sleep and try not to think about what happened. In Ikibindokus, we, the whole family, went back to Vietnam to visit our relatives for the first time. It's been like almost 10 years now. They always had a little vacation. I went to the Buddhist temple. where my grandfather's ashes were kept. It was in this little room, where all the other ashes were stored, with a picture of decased in front of it. There was a little ceremony, and it was very solemn atmosphere. And even though I was not a Buddhist, I put my hand together, and I listened as everyone else prayed. I was in the first row, and then suddenly I felt numb, like I was in sleep paralysis. But then while I was awake, I was unable to move, and I felt I was trapped in my own mind and in my own body. My eyes became blurry, and I saw a figure in the tan slacks and the blue shirt and the green hat again. He was standing where my grandfather was standing, and I couldn't see his face, but I saw his outline. I was shocked and emotional. I snapped out of it. I couldn't see him anymore. I turned over to my uncle that was standing next to me, and I said, "Hey, I see Grandpa." And he just nodded. It was more natural to accept the paranormal in Buddhism. At that time, I felt relieved, glad that I saw my grandfather one last time. So I thought at the time. We stayed in Vietnam for a few more days. It's customary to have a shrine in the house, honoring the ancestors. So basically, you have a place where, with all the pictures of your ancestors, and people would come visit and reminisce about the family members. The shrine was on the 4th floor. It was a party I was eating and drinking. I was drunk. I went upstairs to go lay down. I fell asleep with one of my uncle and aunt next to me. And 30 minutes or so after I went to sleep, I sat up. I looked at my uncle and my aunt with distant eyes. I stroked my imaginary beard, and I said, "Is Tam's family visiting?" Time is my dad's name, and I continue to say things that I couldn't have known about. Other family members, they called my dad up. I was talking to him as if I'm his grandfather. My dad is forever Catholic, but he went upstairs to the altar, and he lit an incense offering for the ancestors. Shortly after that, I fell back to sleep. My great-grandfather had a long beard, and I bear a resemblance to him. Even the mole on my face is the same mole that he had. That trip I had to go back to the US earlier. Classes was going to start. I got back by myself. I was tired and it was a different time zone, and I couldn't sleep. So I put on an exercise activity in the living room. I did an hour of cardio, and then I caught up with an hour of yoga. And at the end of the yoga session, there was a little meditation. So I closed my eyes, and the voice from the deity chanted in the And I didn't hide the volume up because, early in the morning, I didn't want to, disturb the neighbors. After a second on, I started to feel weightless and peaceful. And in the middle of the third, I felt a hot breath on my right ear, and I heard loud whispers of multiple voices. It lasted for maybe half a second, and when I opened my eyes and I saw no one around me, I was still a little disoriented from the meditation. I tried to recollect what just happened. Did I really hear whispers? So I called my friend. I told him I'm going to sleep over at his house. I've seen enough scary movies. It's a bad idea. The other person that believed was my little sister. The one that was sleepwalking. She came home one night. Besides, she's the one in college now. She was parked in the car and she was outside. And she saw my dad washing dishes through the window on the 2nd floor. And she came up and she asked him, "Hey, was your sister here?" My aunt. And he said, no, it's late and she's probably at home. You know, why would she be here? And she told him that. I saw you washing dishes by the window, and there was an older woman with white hair in a bun. Standing behind you, he became defensive. And I told her to stop watching scary movies and imagining things. Eventually, I moved out of the apartment, so I would come back sometimes to have a sleepover. One night, I went to sleep in the room where the crash fell. This room belongs to my little sister now. My sister's closed laptop was in the room. She was away on a school trip. I closed the door. I locked it. I didn't want anything funny to happen. I went to sleep. Suddenly, I was jolted awake. Loud music was playing. I turned on the light and the laptop was open. YouTube was on, and I told myself it was impossible. First of all, the laptop was closed, even if I was sleepwalking. I didn't know her password to log in. Whoever it was, want to play a prank with me? Or wants to know that, hey, welcome back. Eventually we moved out. I found out that it was not the apartment. It was me. So I moved on to professional school in another country. But my first day there, I was so tired. I just crashed on the bed. I didn't care if the bed was dirty or not. I just crashed. I was so exhausted. I opened my eyes to another sleep paralysis episode. I couldn't move. And I heard the door creaking open. It was an Asian woman. She was wearing those Chinese flowery pajamas, and she was young with a bowl-cut hair. She floated around my luggage. She went around it. Then she straddled me to put her legs on top of me. And she looked at me. We were having a staring contest. Her face was pale white. She didn't look evil. She was more like mischievous. She smiled at me. I smiled at her. I blinked twice. She blinked twice. Then she just cocked her head back and I could hear her laugh in my head. Then she got off me, and then I closed my eyes. The next morning, I told my flatmates what happened, and surprisingly, they were supportive. And they offered to switch rooms with me. And then I dug up the history of the town we lived in. And sure enough, there was a sizable Chinese immigrant population there. So, a year went on, I was in graduate school. One night I dozed off after studying for 14 hours. And you know, if you're in graduate school, you're studying full-time for 12, 16 hours a day. I remember it was a Thursday night when I went to sleep. And on Friday at around 2 a.m., I woke up with an uneasy feeling. And I opened my eyes, and I saw a pair of skinny girl legs, and asked myself, oh my God, it's the same strip reality episode. And I looked up to see who it was. I realized if I could look up, I'm not having sleep paralysis, I'm awake. And I looked up, and it was my classmate Macy. And she whispered Ted. And like a pillar of smoke, she just withered away. I sat right up because I could not believe. I just hallucinated someone in my class. So I went out for a drink of water to calm my nerves. I came back in to go to sleep, and there was a heaviness in the room, like the room was under high pressure. It was suffocating. So I turned on the fan and I opened the balcony door. I felt the same heaviness in the room. I just got up to the living room to study, and by 9, I was exhausted, because I would have been up 28 hours already. My cell phone rang, and it was my other friend. Jenny told me that her roommate, Macy, passed away in her sleep. Macy passed at around 1 a.m., and I saw her at 2. I can still see her in my head. A couple weeks later, I had another lucid dream. I was driving a bus, with all of my extended family in the back. So I parked the bus at a roadside shack, and I told everyone, "Hey, wait here. I went to check out the location of this shack right." I stepped off the bus into the muddy ground. I felt the cold, dirty mud splash above my legs. I was wearing shorts for some reason, so I walked into the building. Behind the shack, there was a courtyard, and there was a couple rows of benches, and a few old Asian men were sitting there. I recognized the old man in the tan slacks, and the green hat. It was my grandfather. I also recognized my great-grandfather, the old man with the long beard, and in front of them there was like a shimmering, clear, invisible wall of force fields, like it was shimmering. So I walked close to this barrier, and I pushed on it, and I felt the sting in my hand like a needle jab. But at the same time as I pushed on it, I felt it pulling me in, and I asked my grandfather that, "Hey, what are you doing here? You're dead." Hatches laughed, and the rest of them laughed too. Slowly, the benches with them started retreating back into the distance. I woke up from this dream, and I was crying, and I realized that that was my grandfather saying goodbye, and I haven't seen my grandfather since. After that, I got married. We moved into a house, and we had a son. My 2-year-old toddler slept over at my mom's place, and he said he wouldn't go downstairs because great-grandfather was there. As for sure, I haven't told him about anything like that. I haven't told him about his grandfather or great-grandfather. Around this time, he started having an imaginary friend, like all toddlers do, but they would only play at 3 or 4 in the morning. That worried my wife a little bit because, he needed to go to sleep. So one time at 6-7 p.m., and I was washing dishes in the kitchen, I heard feet running, and it was okay. My little partner. Why is he awake? Out of the hallway into the kitchen, a Caucasian white boy with bowl-cut hair and blue eyes. You remember this boy from the mirror. He ran out of the bedroom into the wall, and then my little toddler came out after him. I took a moment to collect myself and wanted to see what happened. The activities continued. At this time, we had another baby, 2 boys. I was holding a baby in the living room, and putting him to sleep, I was holding him. I was sitting in my chair in the living room, and the house was dark. There was a light that came through the window, probably from a passing car or so. In the living room, there's this liquor cabinet. The light shone into the liquor cabinet. I saw a phantom little dress that belonged to me, like a little girl or something. It was flowing in front of the cabinet. Because it was a glass liquor cabinet, not only did I see the dress in front of the cabinet, I saw the reflection of it in the cabinet too. I didn't do anything, because I didn't want to wake the baby. That's the time that I thought to myself, is this another haunted house? Because I grew up in 2 haunted apartments, and it was the first time I started to think, maybe it's not the apartment, maybe it's me. One time, I fell asleep and someone yelled out my name again. It was a younger female voice. It scared me out of my mind because it was loud. It was the loudest voice in my head I've ever heard. I asked my wife, did she call my name? She said no, and just went back to sleep. I didn't know what any of this meant. I am a laboratory scientist. I work in a hospital. One night I was at work, and I was in the pathology room. The hospital morgue is also in this room. I was cutting a piece of tissue for testing. I was concentrating on my work. Behind me was a cupboard. Suddenly, a few plastic fly holders and clamps came flying out of the cabinet, across the room and hit the other side. It hit the wall. It didn't fall, it flew out of there. Violently flew out of there. But no, I was in the middle of cutting. I was in the sterile field. So I couldn't leave, so I just said out loud, "You know I'm working here. Leave me alone." I finished up as quickly as I could, and I ran out of there. One night I have a checklist in my head of what I needed to do. So I'm totally in the zone going on to the next task. I opened the refrigerator with the glass door to retrieve a unit of blood. I got it, and I swung the door closed. In the reflection in the corner of the room, there was a shadow figure. It is solid black, wearing black scrubs, sitting on the counter in the corner behind me, crossing his arms and looking down. His whole body was black. I didn't process what I saw until a couple seconds later. I turned around, and there was no one in there. I was the only person there. I just dropped everything. I just ran outside. I tell my coworker what just happened. Before this, I would just see the phantom lap coat swinging in my career for vision, or occasionally I heard the disembodied voices or someone calling my name. But this is the first time that I saw the shadow figure. Usually when I do something tedious, I would have my headphones on. I would listen to music or podcast. I took my headphone out, went to the bathroom. I put it on the keyboard. I came back to the bathroom and I looked for my headphones. It wasn't there, and I looked all over. I turned the keyboard upside down. I looked in the drawer, I looked on the floor. Did I drop it? I asked my other coworker in the room if she was playing with me, and she hid my headphone. She said no, she was in her corner, so she went out, and I just spoke out loud. I said, "Hey, can you not mess with me? I'm at work," and returned my headphone. I got out of the room, so both of us went out. I went to get some water too. 3 minutes later, I came back and the headphones was on the keyboard, exactly where I left it. And remember, I turned the keyboard upside down to look for it. I've had this recurring dream where I was in the Vietnamese countryside. I was in one of the villages, in the kitchen. It was not a modern kitchen that we used to. It was a shack kitchen. There's a kitchen in the shack, basically. And it was a wood fire in the kitchen. I would dream I would help out with the cooking, stoking the fire, butchering the meat. And I remember reaching into the crevice. On the side of the stove, I can still see it. It was a darkened, half-burnt piece of wood with a fault crack at a handle. So at the handle, there's a crack, just to move the firewood around. And we wake up and not think too much about it. It's just another recurring dream. So it went to one of my trips back to Vietnam. That's one time we went to an ancestral home of a distant branch of my family. It was in the countryside, and it was a bit of a drive outside the city. It's a big property. I got to the kitchen, and it was the same shack kitchen. I had a surreal moment. I just stopped there, and I looked around. It was the exact same layout. The shelf was exactly the same. I felt a little lightheaded, and my arms and legs were weak, because could not believe that I saw this in my dream. Dejero is when you had a feeling that you've done this before, but I knew exactly what this was. I know the kitchen. I went to the stove. I bent down, I stuck my hand in the crevice. I pulled out the same half-burnt stick with a fork, crack at the handle. This was not a coincidence. I didn't share this with the rest of the family for nobody believed. Another dream I had. My routine was, I would jog in the morning. One time, I woke up to find one of my uncles standing next to me. and put his hand on my chest and tell me to stay home. No, I don't need to run today. He looked just like my uncle, but the only difference, he had a thick mustache. It didn't make sense if he was living in Vietnam. Why would he be here in the US with me? I called and I talked to my aunt's uncle in Vietnam. I found out that my uncle was the youngest in the family. My grandma had a miscarriage after having him, and it was a boy. My aunt told me that it could have been him. The uncle that my grandma had had a miscarriage, and then a few months later, someone in my neighborhood was taking her dogs out for a jog. She was run over by a car whose driver ran a stop sign. I wanted to make the connection, but the timing of the day was off. I drop in the morning. This accident happened in the afternoon. Later, I realized that if I was destined to get run over that morning, but stay in bed instead, then maybe no one else had to take my place, and there would be no accident at all. But yeah, that's conjecture. I dreamed about a family of 4, playing on the side of a house. It was a Caucasian family. There was a green convertible. Personal driving, it was one of those old car AGTO, and they were writing their initials in the year, in the wet concrete on the side of the house. I didn't see what they were writing, but I know that's what they were doing. What else would you write in concrete? And it was a recurring dream. I didn't pay much attention to it, because it's just a dream. Sometime later in real life, we were looking to buy a house, and the housing market in 21 was very bad. Then one afternoon, after putting our names down at 2 different houses, with very low hope, we went back home. And on the way, we had passed by this house with an open house sign, and I told my wife, you know what? Let's just go in, let's try our luck. Went into the house, and I went out by myself. And I got to the side of the house, and just like when I was in that kitchen, I stopped. I was shaking. There it is, the green convertible, GTO. I walked to the side of the garage, and I saw the initials and the year in concrete. All of a sudden, it's like a rush of intensity. I felt everything. I felt the happiness. I felt the nostalgia. I felt a laughter. I felt a shiver. Despite all the emotion that the property has experienced, it shared some of that with me. So the realtor revealed that the owners retired and wanted to move to the United States and needed to sell his house. Usually you need to outbid the other buyer. The price would just go up. However, the realtor told me that she was just instructed by the owner, just before we showed up, to settle for $20,000 over the asking price. So that's what we did. We offered $20,000 above asking price, and we got the house. The house has been good, and I haven't had any paranormal experience here. My wife asked me, "Hey, have you seen anything unusual?" And I said, "No, this is a good house." The last thing is, all the haunts that happen while we go on vacation, there's been 2 that are significant. So we went to Indianapolis to attend a cousin's wedding, and it was a large group of us. We booked a large multi-room house, and the first thing I noticed when I put up was, this is a very nice Victorian house. Oh, but it looks very nice historic. It was in the historic part of Indianapolis. So one night I went to sleep pretty late, and I was tired from a day of driving and attending events. My wife was in the bathroom getting ready to sleep. I closed my eyes, and the light was on in the room. It was bright white light, and I felt the room getting darker through my closed eyelids. So I figured my wife get out of the bathroom and she turned off the light. When I opened my eyes, and what seemed like a second later, the room had a flickering yellow hue, as if the room was lit by candle lights. Standing at the foot of the bed was an older, white man in colonial attire. He had a saber or a sword by his side. I looked over to my right, and there was an older, white woman with salt and pepper hair, in a white nightgown. The older woman was looking into the distance, but the police officer was looking straight at me. I was scared. I pushed myself to sit up, and as soon as I sat up, the older woman turned to look at me. I realized I am awake. I'm wide awake. This is not a sleep paralysis. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to look at them. I saw myself standing on the sidewalk at an intersection. I looked up and saw the signs for the cross street. Pennsylvania and 22nd. A sedan was speeding in its cross intersection, but it hit a pedestrian. The pedestrian's face zoomed into mine, and I saw her face. It was an older black woman with short, buzz-cut hair, and then a name appeared in my head. Wendy. That's when I opened my eyes and I yelled out help. My wife came out of the bathroom, and she asked what happened. I told her what I've seen, and she said, "Let's just go to sleep." I was very unnerved by what I saw. It was 2 apparitions and a memory or something of someone getting run over. So in the morning, I looked on the map, and Pennsylvania. 22nd is 1 street over of where we stay. We stay on the 21st in Pennsylvania. I rationalized that. I must have seen Pennsylvania and 22nd on the map while I was driving, and I must have incorporated that location into what I saw. But I had no explanation for the colonial officer and the woman. I had no explanation for the name Wendy. I Googled car accident in Wendy and that location, but nothing came up. I couldn't explain it. A couple nights later, I sat in the kitchen to talk to one of the uncles. It was early in the morning, again 2, 3 in the morning, and I sat on the table across from him. Behind his head on the wall was an oval vanity mirror. It was angled downward where I sat. I could see his reflection and mine. We were in the middle of a conversation, and I looked up in the mirror, and there was a dark, shadow figure moving on the wall behind me. It stopped, waved its right hand, and continued moving out of view. I turned around right away, and of course there was nothing there. I didn't tell anyone until we got home, and I told my wife. The last thing that happened was in Chicago, Illinois. I visited Chicago in 22 to attend for graduation for my master's degree, though we stayed at a hotel near the university. When we put up in a taxi, the hotel did not look exactly like what I expected. It was a thin and long building, and of course it's in historic Chicago, so we went out to the floor that we were in. I was talking to my wife about what we're going to do tomorrow, so I didn't really pay attention to the interiors of the elevator. We got off the elevator, and I looked for the signs to the room, but the first thing I noticed was how wide the hallway was. Usually, the hotel hallways is barely enough to fit 2 people, but this hallway was a good 8-foot distance, and it reminded me of one location. It looks like a hospital hallway. I told my wife, "Hey, honey, this looks like a hospital hallway," and she's like, "Yeah, it does. It's weirdly very wide." We passed a door frame on the way to the room, and it reminded me of the safety double doors that the hospitals would have. We made it to a room, and we went to sleep. It was late. I was fast asleep when I heard the alarms. In my head or in my ears, I'm still not sure. In the background, I heard people talking, yelling. I woke up to this noise. I opened my eyes then, and the monitor alarm was gone. But the background talking noise, it echoed for like a good second before it disappeared. In the morning, I told my wife, hey, I rationalized to my wife that the air vent must have carried the voices of people talking in the other rooms, and I must have gotten woken up by then. We got up, we went to breakfast in the lobby, so we got in the elevator to go down. This time I was fresh. I was awake. I read the poster that was on the elevator. So this hotel used to be the Cook County Hospital. It's one of the first hospitals established in Chicago. It's a Civil War hospital. They had the first medical internship. And I'm a blood bank and transfusion specialist. And Cook County is the first hospital with the first institutional blood bank in the whole world. I read about it, but I never looked up what the hospital looked like. The wide hallway, the monitor alarm, the people speaking. It made sense then that I would hear it. I didn't feel scared. I felt emotional as a fanboy, basically, because I was in a historic location. I had to have a moment with myself to realize internally that it's not all these places. It's probably me, growing up with passive family, where we don't talk about these things. It's hard for me to come to that realization. I tried to rationalize and disprove as much as I could, but I would accept the things I could not. With paranormal activities, you'll only get it if it happens to you. Auditory apparitions. They're fine as long as they don't make a noise. It's the ones that talk to you that's extra scary. Because the second sense of hearing is more of a confirmation that this is real. This is happening. When you have two or more senses confirming that it's happening, it's no longer something subconscious. It's real. It's conscious. Just a side note here. Our storyteller today mentioned Wendell, a missing link in his story. He had no idea how it was connected to anything. Well, it turns out our editor and sound designer, Sarah Voorhees Wendell, got us scared today when she heard it. Was it just a coincidence? If you have a true story that you want to share, head on over to TrueScaryStory.com and fill out the form. And if you're following the show, we'll get to hear another story next week. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Keep it scary, everyone. See you soon. 1.